Hello and welcome to a tutorial video on my podcast all about knitting and crochet in my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. Today I want to show you how to knit socks from the toe up and bind the stitches off with a stretchy bind off.
As usual, I've already prepared the first sock, and I not only started at the toe and increased the stitches, but I thought I'll also add some stripes. We haven't had that this year. So far I only knit some helix stripes without a beginning or end of round, but this time we will do the beginning and end of round, and the patterns usually say to cross the yarns, and in case you're not quite sure how to do that, I wanted to show that today. I did a 2-color heel, so the first half is one color and the second half the other color. And with the second sock, I'm going to bind off the stitches differently because I want it to be more elastic than with this one. Otherwise, it might be difficult to put the sock on. And that won't be the only difference to this sock, because I decided for the second sock I want to do the stripes half as big so that I have more color changes and I get to the next color change quicker. With the first sock I did 4 rounds per color. With the second one I'll just do 2 round stripes. The yarn is a unpaid subscription colorway. I already knit something with it, but I had enough left over, and I also used solid color purple. I want to show you Judy's magic cast on, and because I'm also showing the stripes and the cast off, I'll just show one way of casting on the stitches, and maybe I'll show the other ways some other time. So to decide how many stitches you want to cast on, you can look at a normal toe and just reverse engineer it and calculate the numbers. But what I like to do is cast on about half the number of stitches, then increase 4 stitches every other round, and then that gives a rather nice toe. So I want to have 36 stitches as usual. Half of it would be 18 stitches, but half of 18 is 9 stitches, but I want to have even number on every needle, so I decided to cast on 16 stitches. That means 8 stitches per needle. Then we'll knit 1 round, and then I'll show you how to do the increases. Now for Judy's magic cast on, you can do that for a provisional cast on, or if you want to have an invisible cast on and to knit in the round. The way I do this cast on, you leave enough for your end to cast on all the stitches. You'll need a bit of experience to measure how much that is. Then you put the yarn over the back needle so that the yarn end is looking towards you, and then I'll pull the ball end towards me and put the yarn end to the back, and then I'll put my fingers in between the yards like so, and I will now use the 2 strands alternatingly, and because I already have one on my upper needle, I need a stitch for the lower needle, and I'll use the upper thread of yarn. And for the upper needle I'll use the lower yarn, and I always go underneath the needle and then over the needle. So if I want to stitch on the upper needle, I have to put the string of yarn in between the needles so I can go over the upper needle, and for the lower needle I go underneath everything and then push the yarn in between the needles so I can go over the lower needle. I think this is slightly different than the original Judy's Magic cast on, but this way the stitches are already orientated the right way and you don't have to go into the back loop for any of the stitches. So I now need another stitch on the upper needle, so I'll use the lower yarn, go in between the needles, go above the upper needle, then I'll use the upper yarn and go over the lower needle like so, and then I go in between the needles like this, then underneath, and then in between the needles from the front to the back. So now I have 6 stitches on every needle. I'll do number 7 on that and on that. And then this is the last stitch for the upper needle, and then the last stitch on the lower needle. Now I have 8 stitches per needle. I finished casting on the stitches. Now with toe up you don't have to cast on so many stitches, but now you have to be really careful because the last stitch is very loose and it's easy to lose it. So the first thing I do, I'll pull it down, hold on to it. I'll take my working yarn and I'll make sure that those 2 strands are crossed over. This is how I cast them on, and then I turn the needles like this, and I want to start knitting. So the lower needle is going to be the upper needle, and that's the needle I want to start knitting. And if you do magic loop and you cast on a circular needle, then you can just pull the lower needle out of the stitches so that the stitches come onto the cable, and then you can just use that needle to knit the stitches. But I have to use a 3rd needle because I have double pointed needles. With the magic loop it's a bit easier because it's a bit more flexible, but it also works with double pointed needles. So I'll push the lower needle slightly out of the way, but I still hold on tight to the yarn end, and I will just knit the first stitch. And now you can see it's very loose, so I keep pulling on the yarn end to make sure that things stay tight. And then after you do Judy's magic cast on, usually you knit all the stitches one time. I say usually because the sock that I'm knitting at the moment, the lace lined socks, you start knitting with 2 colors in that round, but that's not for beginners. So this is 8 stitches. I knit all those stitches once, and you can see the first row of knitting, and I think you can see that the stitches are straight, they're not twisted. Now I turn my needles like this, so the lower needle becomes the upper needle, and now I will knit from the 2nd needle, and I will just go into the stitches. If you do that, if you do the original Judy's magic cast on, you might have to go into the back of the stitches, but with me the stitches are oriented the right way, so you can just knit them normally. And the more I knit, the more flexible things become, and it's a bit easier. I could have put the stitches onto 3 or 4 needles, but I just wanted to concentrate on knitting the stitches. So I knit the first 2 rows, which is basically like 1 round. I'll tug on the yarn end, but it looks rather tight. Now we'll do the first round of increases. I did the increases in such a way that I picked them up from the row below. You could do a knit front back, or you could do a make one. There's lots of ways to increase stitches. It'll look a little different, but it would also work. So I will knit the first stitch, and then with the 2nd stitch I go into the stitch below, put it on the needle. Make sure you keep your thumb in between the stitches so it doesn't unravel. I'll knit the stitch that I pulled up, and then I knit the proper stitch. And then I want to knit, now I'll use more needles. So this is 5 stitches here because I already increased 1. I'll use the next needle. I'll knit until I have 1 stitch left. And the last stitch I want to knit as a normal stitch. So now I grab the stitch underneath the stitch I just knit, pull it up, I can knit it. This is 1 increase, and now I can knit the last stitch. Now I will also put those stitches on 2 needles. If you do magic loop, you don't have to do that. So I knit 1 stitch, then I pick up the stitch underneath the next stitch, hold my thumb in between, knit the picked up stitch, knit the normal stitch, then 2 more stitches, so I have half the stitches on that needle. I can use needle number 4 to do the last 4 stitches, but after the 3rd stitch I will grab the stitch underneath the stitch that I just knit, pick it up, knit it, and then I knit the last stitch, and I've done the first increase round where I increased 4 stitches. Now I will knit 1 round just knitting all the stitches without increases, and then I'm going to repeat the increase row and the normal row. And I started with 16 stitches. I want to go to 36 stitches, so I have to increase 20 stitches. I increase 4 stitches per round, so it's 5 increase rounds. And then also the rounds in between. And once I've done all those rounds, I will have finished the toe. So this was the round just knitting all the stitches. I'll show you the increase once more, and then I'll knit the rest of the toe off camera. Now I'll pick up the stitch underneath the next stitch, knit it, knit the proper stitch, and then I knit to the end of the needle, and with the next needle I'll knit until there's 1 stitch left. If you do magic loop, you just, after the increase, you knit until there's only 1 stitch left. I've done that. That's the stitch I knitted. I go 1 below, pick it up, knit it through the back so it doesn't get twisted, knit the last stitch, and I'll repeat the whole thing. Knit 1, pick up the stitch below, knit, knit, then knit to the end of the needle, and then with the next needle I'll knit to 1 stitch before the end, and then pick up the stitch underneath the stitch that I just knit, knit that so it doesn't get twisted, knit the last stitch, and now I can do another round of just knitting, and then I'll increase, and I'll be back when I'm doing the last increase. So this is the second to last increase. I knit to the end of the needle, and then on the last needle I knit until the last stitch, and then we'll start the stripes. So for both socks I knit the toe with the colourful yarn, and then I'll start the stripe straight away. So this is the first sock, so directly after the increase I started the stripes, so that's what I'm doing now. So I will put the yarn to the side, I'll grab my second color, make sure that the yarn end is long enough so that you have enough yarn to weave it in, and then I hold on to it a little bit. The first stitch, be careful not to pull on the yarn, otherwise the yarn end will be too short, and then just start knitting. And the first stitch tends to be too big, so you can always tug on your yarn end to make sure it stays neat. But once you weave the end in, everything will be nice and beautiful. Now we're not increasing any stitches anymore. I have the number of stitches that I want for the rest of the sock. So one of the reasons I'm doing smaller stripes now is that I can finish the stripes a little more quickly, and I can show you how to change yarns. But I also like different socks. So this is not the end of the round. Now this is the last needle, and now we come to the end of the round, and there you have to be careful because the last stitches tend to be very loose because we haven't used the yarn anymore. So it's hanging there. The stitches tend to get too big, so I'll be careful to hold up tight to the stitches, and the last stitch is very big. Now I pull on the yarn to make it the right size. Don't pull too much, but just enough. Now I finished the first round, and if we knit spirals. So if we keep knitting like that, then we go, and then now I pull the yarn ends. You can see that we have a little like a step. So the round ended with red and I continued in purple. So now we get this little step or corner or something. So if I keep doing that, you get that all at the same side. I don't mind having that. Sometimes I'll just leave it like that. But there are ways of getting rid of that. So you can see that on this sock, you can't really tell where I changed yarns. There you can see it a little bit. I wasn't as careful. There you can see it a little bit. But I tried to make it so it doesn't show. There are several tricks to do that. The easiest trick to do that is at the beginning of your second round in the new color, you will just slip the first stitch. You don't knit it, you just slip the first stitch, and then you continue knitting with the new color. And then I will knit to the end of the round. Right now it's hard to see because we've only just started knitting and we still have the loose ends hanging off of the knitting. So we have to pull on that to really see what's going on. If we do more stripes and then the yarn is a bit tighter, then it's a bit easier to see. Now I'll knit to the end of the round. So this is the last needle, and we'll look at how the trick looks like. And then we also have to change colors. So now everything is loose and a bit confusing. So I'll pull on my yarn ends to get them tighter. And if you look at it now, you can see, let's pull a little more. You kind of see, because I slipped the stitch, I pulled it up into the next round. And that's why the two red stitches sort of come together. This stitch should be next to this one, but because of slipping it, I pulled it up. Now we change colors, and this is where we cross the yarns over. Now let's sort the yarn ends. This is the beginning end in red. This is the beginning purple yarn. These are my two working yarns. And it's going to be easier when you keep going. And to cross over just means to pull this yarn up like so. If I was knitting spiral rounds or helix knitting, I would put the yarn that I just used to the right and pull that yarn from below. Then they won't cross. But then I'd have a hole here because I did 2 rounds, not just one. So I'm going to put the yarn that I just used to the left, and I will use the other color that I'm knitting now, and I pull it up so that it crosses over the purple yarn. Now once I continue with the purple yarn, you see how the yarns cross over and there won't be a hole. But just remember the working yarn to the left and pull up the other yarn on top of it. And now I will just knit my stitches with the other color. Don't pull on the yarn too much, otherwise this is going to get wonky and you will kind of lose that one stitch. It can disappear, so make sure you only pull so that this stitch doesn't disappear. That could also make the stripes a bit wonky, so make sure the stitch stays there. Make sure you have enough yarn to get to the next round. For 2 rounds it's not a lot, but for 4 rounds you need more yarn to get from one stripe to the other. I'll quickly show you on the first sock. So these are the bits of yarn that I used to go from one stripe to the other. So if you hold on to the yarn, you can make sure you have enough yarn to keep the sock loose and don't make it shorter than the other side. Now I'll finish this round. I'll show you the beginning of the second round again, and after that I will just finish off the stripes in the foot and knit half the heel in the first color, and then I'll quickly show you how to change colors in the heel. Now this is the last needle. I noticed that because the stitch is so loose, so I'll try and pull the yarn so that the stitches have the right size. I pull on that end, and now I'm at the second round of that color, so I'll do the trick of picking up the first stitch and then start knitting on the second stitch. Also make sure that this yarn float isn't too short and not too long, so that the stitches look as even as possible. Okay, now I'll finish this round and then I'll change color, and after the color change I'll continue knitting off camera. Okay, this is the last needle for this round. So now I have to change colors again. I'll put this yarn to the left, pick up the second color and pull it. I put this to the left, I'll pull this on top of that strand of yarn. Make sure when I start knitting that I don't pull on the yarn too much, that I have a bit of yarn to go up, and then I'll knit the first round, and at the beginning of the second I'll do my trick. Now if I pull on that yarn a little bit, we can have a look at the stripes, and that doesn't look too bad, does it? So if you look closely, you see that this stitch is really big, but you can't really see this step, and this big stitch is not going to be obvious. So I will continue knitting all the stripes, and I can show you I have the double amount of stripes, and I will knit the first half of the heel, and then before I do the color change I'll come back. See you. So this is the last double stitch for this side, and I'll knit the stitches in the middle of the heel, and then I'll turn around once more, and this is the last double stitch for the first half of the heel. And now I will only knit half the stitches that weren't double stitches. So let me show you what I did. With the first sock I did for the first, I wanted to do 20 rounds, so I did 19 rounds, then knit half the heel, and then the first round in between the two halves of the heel I did the last round of the foot. And as I have small stripes, at 19 rounds I ended up with the red. So now I did the first half of the heel in red, not in purple. I finished half the heel, and now this is the first round in between the two halves. So I'll do this round with the red, with the colorful yarn. I'll knit the double stitches as one stitch, and then I can knit the stitches on top of the foot. And this is the second round of my stripe. So the first round was before I started the heel, and the second round is now. And once I finish the, I think it's instep stitches, not at the end of the round, but at the end of this stripe, and I am where the purple yarn is waiting, this is where I will cross the yarns. I put that to the left, pick up the purple yarn, and now I will knit the double stitches with the second color. So it's not 100% symmetrical, but nobody's going to notice. So I will just knit my double stitches with the new color. Make sure I don't pull the yarn too tight. And then once I've knit all the double stitches to the end of the needle, then I finish the first round in between the two halves of my short row heel. I'll do the second round with the purple. There we go. Now I start the second round in between, and on the instep stitches, this is the first round of purple. So after I finish the heel, I will do the second round of that stripe. So so that after I finish the heel, I will still stay in the same rhythm of having 2 rounds per color. So now let's see when we get to the heel. I probably don't have to do the trick of picking up the first stitches because of the short rows. Things look a bit different anyway. So I will just knit the stitches for the heel. There are more rounds in that color on the heel anyway. So I'll knit to the middle of the heel. I'll put the 5th needle to the side, and I will knit over those 2 needles the second half of my short row heel. So 3 stitches, and I have the middle stitches. This is the first stitch that has to become a double stitch. So I turn round, make a double stitch, then 6 stitches in the middle because my heel consists of 3 times 6 stitches. Let's see, double stitch, 2, 4, 6. 1 more stitch and then turn round, and then I'll keep going like that until I finish the second half of the heel. I'll do 1 more round in purple, and then I will knit all the stripes that I knit here on top of the heel. And if you change color before the ribbing, I would recommend that you do 1 round of knit stitches so that the color change looks a bit more neat. And then I started knitting the rib pattern. With this sock, I should end up on the main color. So this is 2 rounds purple, 2 rounds red. So I will stick to the same color, and then either I'll knit 1 more round so both socks are the same length, or maybe I'll do 1 more round of rib pattern. I'll see what I do when I get there. And once I finish knitting the ribbing, that's when I come back and show you Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off. And I'll show you the difference to the other sock which I bound off normally. See you in a minute. This is the last needle of the ribbing. Then I have the same length as the first sock. I put the stitches onto 3 needles, so I have 12 stitches per needle. This is an even number. If you have 4 times 9 stitches, it's a little bit more difficult for the ribbing. It's not really difficult, but it's just easier to have an even number. So these are the 2 socks. You see the heel, the colors are reversed. I have the same number of rounds. I use the same color for the ribbing. And now I want to do Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off. So for this one, I tried to just cast off loosely. It would probably be enough for a baby, but if you knit bigger socks, heels tend to get bigger. So it's really important to cast off stretchily. So Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off works by working yarn overs in between your stitches, and she does different yarn overs depending on what stitch you knit. So I knit the first stitch. Now I'm looking at a purl stitch, so I do a normal yarn over, and then I pull the yarn over and the stitch over my stitch. Now I'm looking at knit stitch, so I do the reverse yarn over and then pull the yarn over and the stitch over my stitch. So normal yarn over, purl a stitch. You can do it one after the other. First pull the yarn over, then the stitch. Now knit stitch different yarn over, and then you could pull this over and then the stitch over, purl stitch, normal yarn over, and I just prefer to pull both at the same time. And with the knit stitch, I do the yarn over the other way round. And then you keep doing that for every stitch. Purl stitch, normal yarn over. I'll knit to the end of the needle, have a quick look, and pull over, yarn over, purl, pull over, then other way round, yarn over, pull over, yarn over, purl stitch, and pull over. So I'll quickly put this stitch on the other needle so we can have a look at the cast off edge. So you see that it does look differently from a normally cast off stitches. So this looks a bit more tidy. This looks a little bit untidy because the stitches are almost as if they were double stitches, but it just gets so stretchy. To be really able to show you the difference, I'll just quickly finish casting off the stitches by doing the normal yarn over and the yarn over the other way round, and then always pulling the yarn over and the stitch over. And while doing this, you really don't have to pay attention to knit stitches loosely. If you really dislike the way this looks, you can use a different way of casting off loosely, or you can cast off normally and see if that is loose enough for you. You could do an Italian bind off. It takes a bit more time, but it's very pretty and very elastic. I don't really mind what my sock looks like at the cast off edge, especially if I'm wearing trousers. You can't really see it, and even if it is visible, nobody's going to look at it closely. And usually the strange look is mostly when you're not wearing the sock, and then it doesn't really matter what it looks like. And once you put the sock on and there's a bit of tension on the sock, it usually looks a lot better already. So now I'm almost finished. Knit stitch, pull over, oops, lost the stitch there. Okay, knit the stitch, pull both over, yarn over, pull over, other way around, yarn over, pull over. Just a few more stitches to go, and there we go. Just 2 more stitches, I think. No, whenever you hurry, doesn't really work. And this is the last stitch. Pull over. You could knit the yarn now and pull it through. I'll just pull it through a little bit, and let's have a look at the bind off. Maybe it's not the most beautiful edge, but once I pull it apart a little bit, it already looks better. But the really impressive thing about this cast off is you can see how it looks differently. But if I pull on it, it's with the front sock, it stops. But with the second one, I can pull it a lot wider. So there's a lot more possibility of getting your heel into the sock. And sometimes some people don't like it to be too tight on their leg, so that's another good way of using it. So Judy's Magic Cast On, we have stripes, we have a 2-color heel, and Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off. And I hope you could understand everything and now you'd like to knit socks toe up.
I'd be very happy if you would show your socks that you knit toe up in my Ravelry group. There'll be a discussion thread dedicated to all the toe up socks that you might like to knit during the knit along or at any other time. I'd just be happy to see projects that you want to share there. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!